Welcome to another session of the Presale Pulse. We're joining live from the Homer Street Cafe. We're here to talk about everything resale and presale, both in Metro Vancouver and in the Fraser Valley. I'm Ryan Lalonde, and I'm joined with real estate titan, Susana Gonzalez.
Nice. My intro keeps getting better and better.
I think you're doing the writing for this.
Good point.
Today we have an action-packed set. We're pumped to talk about everything real estate, and when we're thinking about this, we're thinking about another huge month of sales in October. We love to see that market continuing to surge. We're going to hit on the second wave and what it's doing to British Columbia. We're going to touch a little bit on the dogfight that we're seeing in concrete, and then of course some of the other macro pieces. So we have Horgan in, Trump out, kind of.
Someone should tell him that, but
Almost.
yes.
So the Presale Pulse Live is about recapping both the presale and the resale marketplace. We're also going to touch on everything that's trending throughout the industry. And of course, our job here is to make sure that all of our subscribers are leaving feeling real estate intelligent with their finger on the pulse.
On that note, all of the data that you'll see in today's Presale Pulse, use the links below and you can access all of it. In addition, if you want to be a real estate insider, go to our website, mlacanada.com, and sign up for the MLA Canada Newswire. That's a daily email in your inbox, which will give you access to all of the real estate news in our region. That includes new developments, architecture, project launches and releases, everything you need to know. In addition, if you like what we're doing, let us know. If you don't like what we're doing, you can also let us know. What do you want us to talk about? What do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? Really open to feedback. We want to make sure that you feel like you're getting what you need out of this. So please don't be shy. Let us know what you think.
Tell us what you need and we'll make it happen.
Absolutely.
So Suze, with all that being said, why don't we jump into some of the pre-sale data?
Yeah, we've had another great, I feel like a broken record. October was really a continuation of what we've seen in the last few months. 14 projects released, over 1,500 homes. That's actually the most we've seen during COVID. So definitely a lot of activity happening out there. The other most notable thing about that is that 5 of those projects were concrete projects. So we saw High Point by Ledmac, we saw Format by Cressy, Apex by Denna, and then of course we did see multiple townhome projects in Coquitlam and in a few other places because of course the townhome market is continuing to thrive.
So Suze, why don't we talk a little bit about absorption rate in the month of October. Now, this was one of the biggest months that we've had so far this year. We saw over 1,500 doors come into the marketplace. That is fantastic. I think the real optimism that we had last month was the notion that much of that was going to be concrete, and there was a lot of interest in terms of how that was going to perform. We saw 25% of those 1,500 doors actually absorb in that 30-day period. That is, although that's somewhat similar to where we were in previous months, the aggregate number, 386 transactions, that's so positive. And the big majority of those were actually concrete, which is nice because traditionally our concrete has been a wider range of buyer types. Previously, from the time that COVID set in all the way up until the months of September, we were really noticing that many of our home buyers were coming from single family or townhouses. Much of them were looking for ground-oriented product. And so to see the return of the investor into the marketplace is something that's really exciting.
So just to touch on a couple of those concrete projects, because obviously we're watching them closely, and actually we got to be a part of some of them. Format by Cressy, tremendous interest. It's a very unique product type. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, highly recommend you do so. Some personalizations and customizations in that project that we really haven't seen anywhere else. And so a massive kudos to Jason Turcotte and the team at Cressy for really putting together a product that, like the Cressy legacy is really unique and very thoughtful in the marketplace. Additionally, Apex by Denna Homes, this is part of a larger master plan community at Sealand Village, multiple towers there. Apex has also been going extremely well, over 100 homes already sold. And then of course West Coquitlam, which we've had our eye on given the amount of product that potentially can come in that marketplace. High Point by Lettingham McAllister. They released their product on the heels of course, Anthem SoCo last month, and they've also done quite well. So over 80 homes sold there. The homes there are a little bit larger, and so it'll probably take them a bit more time to just sort of get through their volume, but all promising signs that we've got a bit of depth in that market, which is good news to a lot of people who've still got product to come in that market.
I think out of some of the recent conversations that we've had with Ward, he's very optimistic about where that marketplace goes. He's done a great job with the support of his team of pushing homes into the marketplace that, while they're a little bit larger, they're just finished so beautifully, and we think that that's really resonating well with our end users.
Yeah, and he's got, I think, more product coming in that marketplace than almost anyone, so it's he definitely has his finger on the pulse there.
Susanna, let's talk absorption now. We know in the month of November it's going to be another big month. It's not going to be the 1,500 doors that we saw in the month of October, but we are estimating somewhere around 800. This is going to come across 7 projects. So we have 1 concrete, 1 wood frame, 6-story, and then of course a handful of townhouse product. Much of the townhouse product will be in the Coquitlam marketplace and a few out in the Fraser Valley. But I think all eyes are really going to be on 2 marketplaces when it comes to concrete. That's going to be King George Hub out in Surrey. We know that they're beginning to just dip their toe in the market, and that's really exciting. And then, of course, following Richmond Center. We know that they've had a huge success message in the last 30 days. We're still trying to dig in more. It feels like there's somewhere between 100 and 150 doors at a very strong price, but much of that is going to come out in the marketplace over the next 2 weeks, and we're excited to learn more.
So let's turn our attention now to MLS data for Greater Vancouver. Another big month in sales. This is the 4th consecutive month of sales transactions over 3,000. In fact, over 3,600 in this case, which is just slightly higher than September. In addition, we also saw inventory come down by around 1,000 units. So it'll be interesting to watch how prices react to that, given the sales activity that we're seeing.
You know, when we think about year over year, we're 29% higher this month than we were a year ago, which is fantastic. And then we're also seeing us continue to trend above that 10-year average. So it's certainly demonstrating incredible depth going into the fall months. And I think that leads well into overall benchmark price. Now we've seen some minor increases over the previous 30 days. It's up about $5,000 from where we sat at the very end of September. And when we compare that to where we were a year ago, we're up approximately $60,000 in HPI price. Our expectation, though, is that as sales ratios continue to be incredibly strong across all product types in almost every market, our belief is that we're going to continue to see the upward pressure that we've talked about in the months past.
And yet happy to see that prices aren't escalating too quickly, because of course we want it to be sustainable and we want the market conditions to be just far more attainable for people. So even though our sales to listing ratios have certainly increased, we're seeing 30% now in detached. That's up from last month. We're seeing 25% in the condo market and 43% for townhouse market. Again, all of those numbers are up from last month. And so even though those sales to listing ratios are so much higher, it is good to see that pricing is moving up, but it's moving up at a nice rate that's gonna be far more sustainable for us as a market.
You know, and similarly to where we sat in the previous 3 to 4 months, we're seeing secondary market surge. The expectation is that Whistler, parts of Langley, and then of course Squamish, those are all performing very nicely. But I think the real big surprise is what's happening in West Vancouver, North Vancouver, East Vancouver. We're seeing surges there still, and that's something that we're going to keep our eye on. And if we draw our attention a little bit closer to the Fraser Valley, similar story. 4th consecutive month of over 2,000 transactions. This is industry setting pace for them. It's a period of time that they've not experienced in the past. 2,300 transactions, that's up 6% from where we were in the month of September. And of course, the same upward pressure in price that we're witnessing on HPI in Metro Vancouver, we're also seeing in the Fraser Valley. What's really fascinating though is that inventory continues to be chipped away at it, and it's dropping now below 1,000 units. And so our expectation is that the price gains in the Fraser Valley will outpace those that we're expecting in Metro Vancouver.
The single family market in particular, almost 10% up, and the townhouse market up 5%. So definitely seeing some pushing there.
You know, and when we think about sales to listing ratios, which is one of maybe the best indicators about the current health of the marketplace, Fraser Valley, once again, on fire. But actually more on fire this month than it was the previous. We saw previous months sitting at 32% sales ratio on detached product. That's actually increased by 10 points now up to 42%. That is an incredible surge. We're also noticing that townhouses are holding strong, 52%. That's record-breaking territory as well. And then of course condos still holding at 30%. Our expectation though is these numbers continue another few months with inventory levels dropping. We're going to continue to see the HPI increases that you just shared.
Yeah, 100%.
Suze, let's talk trending topics. So there's 2 in particular that we're thinking about today. The first is LATA, which is finally coming into play at the end of November. And then of course the second in immigration, some of the recent announcements around the federal government and their upcoming targets. Where do you want to start?
Let's get into the Transparency Act.
Oh, this is interesting. It's coming at a time where foreign ownership certainly is not been nearly as active, post-COVID as we would have expected. The big changes that we're seeing here is in the disclosure of beneficial interests, whether directly or indirectly tied to real estate. This registry comes into place on November 30th. The really interesting part, though, is that the general public will not have accessibility to the database until the latter part of April of next year. And in the in-between, we're noticing that there's a significant more restrictions and requirements around how we disclose beneficial ownership interests and what's required in order to move transactions forward in the marketplace.
And so what does that really mean? For people who are listening, how do you think that truly impacts our market, or how people might make different buying decisions?
I think at the root of the opportunity that we're chasing down as a country is we want to understand who's buying property, where are they buying property, and are they holding for themselves or are they holding for corporations? And I think it adds additional layers of transparency so that the general public can have a better understanding about what's really happening in the marketplace.
And that ties into immigration a little bit. It's an interesting time to be talking about immigration given our borders are closed and likely will be closed for some time. Our federal government, though, has put together some lofty targets for immigration, an additional 50,000 permanent residences per year on top of the targets we already had set. So this is pretty substantial because we know a lot of those permanent residents will land here in the Lower Mainland, and those people are going to need a place to live. On top of that, we've been talking for the last 12 to 18 months about the impending lack of supply. Not a lot of concrete projects were released in the last 18 months. So if you put that together with the additional influx of immigration, it definitely is going to be an interesting time, potentially with increase in pricing, and we'll see a lot of activity.
One of, I think, the aspects of immigration that we have to also touch on just relates back to perspectives around it and foreign ownership. Now, we live in a city, specifically in Vancouver, where density is hard to get out of the ground unless we have considerable investment behind each building, and that comes in the form of forward selling options or pre-sales. And much of the concrete marketplace is driven by foreign ownership or local investments that truly are investments. And without that surge in the initial launches of a project, it's very difficult to hit pre-sale test financing, which means that the density cannot be built. And when we think about immigration, when we think about LATA, and then we also think about that NIMBYism type perspective, we have to be very, very careful what that sets us up long-term for in this province, because as we really know, our biggest opportunity in the future is about recruiting and retaining some of the world's best talent around productivity and innovation. That means a really robust job market with A players that are able to come into this country, come into this province, and bring incredible know-how. And so when we think long-term about the long-term viability of British Columbia, we have to think about that as part of the equation. And home ownership is a requirement. If people can't own or they can't rent and we don't have housing to support them, it's going to be very challenging to recruit some of the best talent of the world into our province. So definitely something that we're talking a lot about in our boardrooms, and we're trying to do our very best to try to understand what some of these implications will mean for us, both in the short term from real estate values and long term from the economic outputs of our country.
Yeah, and of course the irony is that there's a lot of people who worry about affordability, and yet when we're resisting this supply and we're resisting this development, and it takes us 5 years to get a project out of the ground, the reality is that we're pushing prices up when we do that, and therefore not really solving the problem.
So thank you for joining. It's been another great session. Suze, I've enjoyed the time.
Yeah, likewise.
And again, special thanks to Homer Street Cafe for giving us some space. I'm also going to give Michael and John a big shout out from Urban Analytics for all the incredible data that they always offer. Keep in mind that all the information, all the data that we've shared, it's all down below. Check that out. Click on that subscription button. Make sure you get some great content coming to you daily. And if there's nothing else that you have to touch on, Suze,
It's a wrap.
we're going to say thank you for the time.